Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Bill C-11 and what my thoughts are on that bill. All right, thanks so much for joining. This is my second video while being back on YouTube, and I thought that it was really timely and super important. And a lot of you that are watching this also follow my Instagram platform. Link is in my bio, in my description of my YouTube channel, but you'll know that I am a lawyer. So not only am I a lawyer, I am a spiritual healer and teacher. I've actually transitioned mainly out of practicing law into being in the education space of law. And so when I started hearing about, first it was Bill C-10 and then Bill C-11, there's a lot of confusion going around. I wanted to ensure that I was well informed about what the bills are. And I love to teach all of you about my interpretation of the bill. And being a lawyer and trained in that profession and trained in interpretation, so I did a lot of contract disputes and I looked a lot at policy, insurance policy, what it really means, what the restrictions are and what the exceptions are, right? And so I have worked in this space quite a bit, and I wanted to really break down what I believe these bills are. And so before we start, I just want us to take a couple of deep breaths because I know it's a really kind of heated topic at this moment. So if you will, humor me. Just close your eyes for a sec and take a deep breath in. 1. Hold it and out. Let's do it again. One more time. And out. And again, last time. Hold it. Out. All right, you can open your eyes. So I just want us to really relax our nervous system. And we've been so used to and now kind of confined by the restrictions of society and the government and culture in these last couple of years that any sort of sight at a loss of freedom ends up giving us anxiety, right? We end up in this freeze, flight, fly mode. I said that in a weird order, but you know what I mean. And this bill is no different. So a lot of people are just learning about this bill right now. I've talked about this on my Instagram story, but this bill and the proposal of this, let's say, amendment to the Broadcasting Act has been around for a couple of years. This is not a new thing. So first and foremost, I want to say that it's only now that it's really being passed and pushed and more in the media that it's important to society. And the reason I want to bring that up is because a couple of years ago, when the farmers' protest was really heavy, I was one of the main advocates for that. So a lot of the talking or a lot of the advocacy I did or a lot of the news and media that I did was about teaching people what the laws are. And in that scenario, it was why these laws are really bad for Indian farmers and how it really impacts the global economy on a mass scale. And so during that point in time, because I was one of these main advocates for this arena, let's say, I was already being censored. I'm censored a lot. This specific platform I'm posting this video on terminated my account. And so it's, whatever, I'm saying that openly here because I want you to know that I've been impacted by this for a while, and so have a lot of others, especially minority voices. And so this goes beyond this specific bill at the specific time. This is more or less a cultural issue, and there's a lot of biases that play into that. So a couple of years ago, maybe April 2020 or something like that, or maybe I don't even know. Anyways, I've been talking about it for a while. So I talked about what these regulations are as well as whether I'm worried. I mean, my answer is no, and it remains no. And I know that may be shocking for some individuals, but like I said, I want us to remain grounded and to remember what the mainstream narrative is. So if we think about the amount of BS we've seen in mainstream media, if you're watching this, you probably, recognize and realize that a lot of the vid stuff was propaganda, misinformation, a lot of fear mongering, right? So it's really important for us, because we've learned a lot during these times, to really take a step back and think about what do we want to believe, right? What platforms do we believe now? And using our level of discernment in a way that helps us really learn more about our own guidance system and about our own rights and policy. And so on the outset, of course, this looks like something really scary, like we're going to be censored, we're going to be suppressed, there's the ability for us to lose income. And I see that. I definitely see both sides. And like my previous video I made about the documentary, on this I kind of stand in the middle. I understand the fears, but I feel that the fears are a lot more like self-sabotaging anticipation sort of vibes rather than it being reality. And so it's like, oh, this could happen to us. The thing is, it could happen anyways because the algorithm already suppresses our voice when they don't agree with us, right? And so rather than, I think, acknowledging that, I feel a lot of people have said that, well, now they're going to have a right to suppress us. When have they ever had a right to suppress our voice in the first place, right? And I understand that the bill has not been debated and that the NDP and Liberals shut that debate down. And let's just look at it from the NDP Liberal woke standpoint when it comes to ideology and identity politics. For them, their excuse is going to be, it's going to be racist to debate this bill because we want to put minority voices at the forefront, right? So they're going to continue with, oh, we're doing the right thing for the vast majority of people. Jagmeet Singh, for example, continues to use the Sikh religion. And a lot of us have outright said that we don't believe he's a true Sikh because of how he has ostracized Sikhs, right? In terms of equality, that's a whole other topic. But overall, I know judgment against him. I'm just spitballing about what we have heard in the last couple of months, especially as he's become more and more vocal in his coalition with the Liberals, but also disagreeing with the Liberals. And anyways, that's a whole dumpster fire hot mess, right? So they have been, or let's say Jagmeet Singh has been really vocal about identity, but on the opposite side being super discriminatory against other voices, let's say. So when it comes to, hey, let's argue this bill, they're going to use the same excuse of it's racist to do that. You're not standing by minority voices, right? And so that's how the Liberals and NDP have continued to try to get the vote, right? They continue to try to pull out heartstrings, except they're completely failing at this point and creating their own demise. Right now, overall, we are going into a whole new paradigm and a whole new way of living. And what that looks like is New Earth, spiritually. So me as a light worker and healer, being at the forefront of New Earth is really teaching people, and my purpose is to teach people and educate people on what I've learned and what I've been through in past lives, and now bringing that so we can all kind of succeed. I'm not the only person doing that, right? So this isn't about me. It's overall why I'm making these sort of videos, because I want everybody to feel comfortable in the way that the world is progressing. And I know on the outside it doesn't look like that. Usually we have to crash and fall a couple of times before we get up and do something right. That's just how it is, right? So the pandemic really brought that kind of like all the gunk of the planet to the surface. It's kind of like, you know, when you go and you're going for a walk and you're along, let's say, the seaside. This happens in Vancouver all the time. That's where I live. And for example, if you're from Vancouver and you're walking along the Yaletown seawall, you'll see once you get close to like the stairs there's like a pileup of gunk from the tide. So all like the dirt, all the logs and wood and just like garbage that's in the sea, right? So think of like the pandemic energy as bringing all that to shore so that way we can like dispose of it. And so it looks, again, like I said, like a dumpster fire because it really is. And it's also because we can't live in that same vibration or with the same mindset. And a part of the shift in the paradigm, a part of the shift in society is us, being more self-regulated for sure, but millennials and those in like, let's say my generation or younger, and even some older, I have some clients that are older. If you ever want to work with me for life purpose, you can book a reading via the description below. I work with people of all ages, like 20 to like 70. But overall, it's like getting out of the matrix basically, right? So overall, we are leaving our 9-to-5 jobs to find more fulfillment, right? A part of that fulfillment is creation and content creation. But the thing is, it's pretty unrealistic in a 3D world to have no regulation, especially when you are making income over what you create, right? So let's just look at it from that level. Of course, it's passion-based. People are using their platforms to spread awareness, to give users and viewers what they want. And that's very much well and true. The thing is, as more people start to live in their purpose and in their passion, I feel it's necessary and just common sense to have regulation around it, right? But of course, the fears that come up is, what is that regulation and what does it entail? So this on the outset looks like it's a big shift in our reality or what we can do. And naturally, people are going to read this and be like, oh my God, there's all these rules and restrictions. And when I read that as a lawyer, I'm like, I don't really see many rules and restrictions. I see certain ways in which things could maybe be problematic or bring to question what the content is, but a lot of it is in anticipation of or the fear of. And that's natural because we need to be proactive and preemptive about our measures and our policy and know what we're getting into, right? So I want to just read the summary, a little bit of the summary of what the Act says here off of my laptop. So Bill C-11. So it's amending the Broadcasting Act to, among other things, so including add online undertakings for the transmission or retransmission of programs over the internet, right? So that includes streaming platforms, Spotify, Amazon, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Netflix, and things like that. Overall, it's to serve the needs of Canadians from racialized communities, right? It's specifying that the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, the Commission, must regulate and supervise the Canadian broadcasting system in a manner that takes into account the different characteristics of English, French, and Indigenous language broadcasting, different conditions of how those, let's say, how that messaging can be promoted. Ensuring that any broadcasting undertaking cannot make maximum or predominant use of creative and other human resources in creation and presentation of programming contributes to those Canadian resources in an equitable manner. So basically distributing the amount of content that we see equally among minority groups. Facilitating, Canadian programs, taking into account the variety of broadcasting, providing, let's say, some oversight in this, and authorizing the commission, so the Canadian broadcasting, let's say, system, to be responsible for this oversight, right? And so I want us to think about the flip side of, if we are asking for regulation on media, let's say this should go for all media. So let's flip it, okay? Just perspective-wise, and say, and people are going to go into low vibration right away and say, well, they're not going to do that. We need to not be in that mindset. We need to be practicing. We need to normalize being happy. Okay, we need to normalize not being in the self-sabotage mode all the time, because we need to be able to get out of this. And I understand that that's very difficult. And we can feel multiple things at the same time and not have faith in anything. And when we continue to not have faith, we continue to manifest shit in our life. So it's really that simple. So we can all decide to be in a swamp, or we can decide to be happy, and there's going to be a mixture of that crowd on here, as there is on my platform. And like I say on my Instagram all the time, is we're a dysfunctional family, and we're all here to support one another no matter what the views are, no matter where you're at. Okay, and that continues to go with this video. And so it's bringing to ground zero and really looking at how we can be more positive. And that's everybody's individual right and obligation and inner authority to be positive about the way that the world is going, okay? So overall, I can't remember what I was going to say, but in reading it, right, we're looking at this as oversight. So we should be thinking, all right, in my opinion, we can now regulate mainstream. We can now ask for accountability in mainstream media. We can now say that you too are obligated to go by this act, which is technically true. So during the Freedom Convoy, during even farmers' protest, the amount of misinformation and propaganda in the media was just insane. A lot of you won't even know about the farmers' protest propaganda that was going on, because again, it was propaganda, and people didn't seem to care that what was happening in India mattered. And I did a lot of videos and posts on, like, hundreds and hundreds of it on my Instagram, if you want to check it out, about the links between what was going to start happening in the economy. And the reason that this continues to happen is because of the amount of awareness that's needed in other demographics. And that's just a natural 3D way of life. People don't care until it's them, unless you have empathy or unless you come across the information. Not to call anybody out. It just kind of is what it is, right? And so it's now asking for the accountability in these mainstream outlets that have taken over and created a lot of misinformation. Okay? So at the forefront of this act is wanting to preserve Canadian interest. there's naturally a worry that content creators are going to have their voices suppressed because maybe they don't fit into certain regulation. I'm not really concerned about that because the algorithm already does this. This is not like a new thing. The algorithm already suppresses voices. It just may be that now other individuals will have more right or will have more space in their creation. So people that have had a lot of views, that's great. You're going to continue to get those views because of your audience. But overall, are more voices going to be put on your homepage because because these voices need to be heard. We don't really know because we don't really know what that looks like yet. Of course, we can assume the worst and the negative because of what we've already seen. And so, we are pushing towards having more equity and inclusion. At least we hope so. And this is, I don't want to say in a way this is that, because I don't actually really believe it. I feel like that's naturally happening through our own forces, but that this sort of push is something that we can stand behind to say, now we have a 3D thing to point to that makes sure that this happens, that makes sure we're reasonably heard. And of course, that whole scenario or the questioning of that is uncertain, or that topic is uncertain because we are so used to not actually adequately being heard. But that's going to change. That's going to change, right? People are used to the worst case scenario. I have the act in front of me, or the bill in front of me, so I have some notes on here I want to make sure I go through. But it's, we're used to the worst case scenario, so people start to prepare for that. But we need to prepare for the best case scenario. We need to assume the best. We need to look at this as we are now going to be able to monitor ourselves and regulate ourselves based on this regulation that makes sure that our voices are heard, right? And the thing is, like I said, I don't disagree with the bill overall. Of course, we're naturally going to have concerns. It's a very broad bill. But the thing is, if you are making money, I'm sorry, but if you're making money on this platform, if you're making money over your content creation or your opinions, there should be some regulation. Doesn't mean that they can shut down your content or that that's how it should be. But if you, let's say, didn't agree with somebody, would you want them to be regulated? Right? So we can't be hypocritical in these sort of scenarios. We all have diverse opinions. We all have differing viewpoints. But of course, people went away from the 9-to-5 job to live in purpose and create abundance within that purpose. But with that, because we live in a 3D space, there has to be some regulation. It can't just not exist. And it's also never going to be completely fair for everybody involved. That's just the way it is. That's the way the system is. So we have to remember the times that we live in, the patriarchal and colonial structure that we are still in. Okay? Like I said earlier, platforms already censor people. I'm censored all the time. They censor minority voices all the time. This isn't new. This is not new. I've been shadow banned so much. So again, it's always more impactful when it impacts more people. And so that's where the empathy and compassion comes in. I already talked about ideology concerns. Okay, so it says encouraging the development of Canadian expression by providing a wide range of programming that reflects Canadian attitudes, opinions, ideas, values, and artistic creativity. So there can naturally be a concern in that wording, right? So I just want to talk a little bit about interpretation because it's what reflects Canadian attitude and value. It's very subjective. And in law, there have been times where I've written 10 pages on the meaning of a word. And that's just legislation overall. That if reading something like this, I spent 10 pages contemplating what a beneficial owner of a vehicle could be. Like, who's a beneficial owner of a vehicle? Like, people can have a whole trial based on the meaning of a word. That's the legal system. So I think it's important to come on and say that the ways in which these words are interpreted, sure, they can be defined. So the definition, let's say, defined terms are these terms at the front here. Are these terms at the front of the act that you're going to see bolded, okay? And so the way in which they're defined there are the way that they're meant to be referred to throughout the act. but it doesn't mean that it can't be struck down. It doesn't mean that it can't be questioned or litigated against. Overall, just like I talked about, mandates are not law. Legislation is created by the government, but the Constitution, let's say, or the Charter is the land of the law. And so if something seems to, let's say, bypass freedom of expression or public interest, it can be struck down and it'll have to be revisited. So if we end up seeing those sort of scenarios, this legislation is not the be-all, end-all. Of course, there are steps that we can take. Let's say that it gets to that worst case scenario, but we're going to hope that it doesn't, okay? Let's see. Yeah, Canadian programming being a main one. I'm not too concerned that international viewers won't be seeing your content. I mean, it's continuing to tell people to make sure they follow and look at your stuff. When I'm banned and censored, that's how people see my stuff, is they know to look up my profile because I'm shadow banned again. Again, it's just more people being impacted by what us minority voices or what us really vocal people have already been impacted by. And unfortunately, it's just like the tough reality of feeling the brunt of what marginalized groups have already felt. And it doesn't mean that has to do with skin color. It means what those that have been super out there to voice their opinions or living in their purpose and in their power. I don't really see this being like the person that's making food vlogs is going to be suppressed, or their food videos are not going to get out there. Like, it's more about the self-awareness and the health and advocacy and activism policy. Like, those sort of voices are the ones that will be more monitored, but we're already being monitored. So it's just not a new thing. Yeah, so the fact that such a program has been assigned under a unique identifier under an international standard system. So, I mean, so with that is freedom of expression and ensuring that your freedom of expression aligns with the rules and regulations of international countries. And that's something that, again, is already in place, because we see that in Instagram and on YouTube, where sometimes videos are not available in certain countries because of the content. And I've seen that with my own stuff. I'm just moving forward to the important parts. And the word undertaking overall in law, let's say, or in legislation, means a promise to uphold. It's like in law, like, do you undertake to do that? It's like, do you promise? Do you pinky swear? If you break the fucking pinky swear, you're a dumb bee. Not really, but you know. So it's again, promising to uphold something. So yeah, the facilitation of negotiation. So that is, you know, the ability to talk about the content and what must be reasonable. But these are like extreme things. Like, this is not something that's going to be occurring with every single YouTube creator, okay? So one part I did find a little concerning is paragraph 6, which is on page 13 of 36. Well, one of the PDF versions had 56, and then when I went on the summary version, it had 36. So that's what I'm looking at. Paragraph 6. Okay, well, it says paragraph 10(1)(e). Overall, it says, respecting in relation to a broadcasting undertaking other than an online undertaking, the proportion of time that may be devoted to the broadcasting of programs, including advertisements or announcements of a partisan political character, and the assignment of that time on an equitable basis to political parties and candidates. And so it's, how do I explain this? It's like giving equal access in time, which again can be problematic, right? And also it's who, again, is regulating the ads that are out there. What political party? How much of their content are they going to want you to see? right? And those are things we're already mindful of in the media. And so it's just continuing to use your discernment and your just common sense that you have as you're going through your daily interactions. It says, paragraph 8 on page 14, respecting unjust discrimination by a person carrying on broadcasting undertaking an undue or reasonable preference given. So it's the question of what unjust discrimination is. And this is a specific repeal in the French version. And what could be seen as discrimination will vary depending on the demographic, vary depending on the province. And that's something that, again, we've already seen through censorship overall. And so it's coloring in the lines, right? Not being super blurry of like what our opinions are, but also not outright being discriminatory. And this is more like, okay, now it's written in the guidelines versus what's actually societally acceptable. Copyright, something we already have to go through. Another thing is freedom of expression, right? So it says under 10.1, for greater certainty, the Commission shall make orders under Section 9.11 and regulations under Section 10.1 in a manner that is consistent with freedom of expression enjoyed by users or social media services that are providing under online undertakings, right? So it's ensuring that individuals are still, like, even though they're regulated, still have freedom of expression, right? So it says the conditions under 9.11, the Commission may, in furtherance of its objects, make orders imposing conditions on the carrying on of broadcasting undertakings that the Commission considers appropriate for the implementation of the broadcasting policy, right? Overall, it's saying that, of course, freedom of expression has limits, and that's something that's already in law. Freedom of expression has limits so long as you're not discriminatory. That's the charter anyways, right? And so in those specific areas, it's ensuring that you are distributing material that, sure, you have an opinion, but is not outright hateful. And I mean, these are just things that somebody can be sued for anyways when it comes to defamation of character. And so we're more worried about this and not with like politicians, let's say. We're more worried about this when it comes to individuals, right, that are living their regular life. Conflict of interest is another one that I want to cover. So the exceptions of who can be appointed as a chairperson on a commission committee that would, let's say, address these breaches or potential breaches cannot have a conflict of interest. And let's just be honest in saying that Trudeau is known for ethics breaches and conflicts of interest, and that's something that I will be definitely looking out for to see who has a conflict of interest if they announce who would be on a specific committee, let's say, because naturally you have an overlap because of their duties and powers, but he is notoriously known for, I guess, having violation and ethics breaches, and those are things that are still, like, that he hasn't been reprimanded for, let's say. So almost every act is going to have a section about punishment, right? So you see that here. So if you contravene, right? If you contravene, anybody that's guilty of a punishable in a summary conviction is liable to, not more than 50,000, deal with 25,000 every subsequent. So if you're guilty, up to 25,000. If you commit again, not more than 50,000, right? So summary conviction is basically, is found that you breached. Yeah, okay, guilty, I breached. All right, this is what you got to pay. Okay? And so liability is always going to be there. Don't be scared by it. Naturally, the mainstream media is not going to break down the policy or the legislation to you. They're going to want you to be scared about what you're putting out there because it goes against the narrative, right? So we have to remember that they are only going to talk about what interests them and the ways in which these rules can make them look advantageous or make you scared in the fear-mongering. So let's not forget about how sneaky they can be, and also that a lot of these journalists have likely not read the act, right? So I've had a lot of journalists that ask me what the rules mean or what the law is. So they're trained in journalism, maybe, right? What I mean by maybe is maybe they went to school for journalism, maybe not, maybe they got a job another way. A lot of them have gone to school for journalism, but they did not go to school to read the law. And so a lot of the time they're getting this information from external resources, and also keeping in mind, where are those resources? Who are those people? Okay. Yeah, administrative monetary policy, already know that. Yeah, fear mongering, already talked about that. So remembering what that means, right? Remembering who that is. And there's like the debt due to Her Majesty. Oh, if you contravene, you owe to the Majesty. Like, no one ever owes to the Majesty. Literally, okay, I've got to tell you something. So we have PLTC to become a lawyer in BC, which is a practical legal training course. There are like similar programs across the country, depending on the province. But in PLTC, there's like, I can't remember what the term was, but it's basically like, if you like threaten the queen or whatever, like, oh, you're like, it's an indictable offense, meaning like it's very serious. We're just like, when does that happen? Like, what are you talking about? It's just like it's a colonial patriarchal system that we live in still, right? Together, the supremacy culture and whatever that we've been built on. So then it's just a thing that they always include, but like nobody knows what F it means. Like literally nobody knows what it means. Oh, one thing I want to talk about is conservatives are saying that not having a debate on this is draconian. And what that means is like, oh, it's like blasphemous. Like, how could you not allow us to do this? This is so harsh, draconian. Like, it's like, really aggressive to not allow us to have a debate on this. Things we got to remember that the conservatives, Pierre Poilievre included, is now using his platform and the popularity he gained during Freedom Convoy, or when he was against Trudeau, because he took that as bait, right? So none of these people are innocent. Let's just say that, okay? A lot of these politicians don't have the same power and voice that we do as individuals. A lot of them do, but a lot of them are not willing to stick up for us, right? We already see that in their actions. And so remember that because there's an outcry of this bill, or because people are concerned about it, they're trying to get the empathy and sympathy or the power by saying, well, we want to debate this bill. The Liberals and NDP are so fucked up for not wanting to do that. Of course, you should always have a bill debated. You should always have that. That's due process. That's just not something that this current government goes by, and we know that. So that's another problem that we may see looked at as in the Senate, similar to the implementation of the Emergency Act, right? So how many things does Trudeau need to do in order to like just fucking be gone already? We don't really know. So these sort of moments are awakening moments and pockets of enlightenment for those that are not just like completely bogged down by the ignorance of the Liberal government or the NDP. And so we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but like this is similar to like when people got mad that, well, not mad, but when like the restrictions, when they voted and it was no, and like I had written on my profile that I already had my prediction about, and it was literally within one day my prediction was right. I said June 21st. June 20th is when some of the restrictions, they lifted for the V-free. But when it got denied a couple weeks before, I was like, I'm not worried, right? Because they needed those Liberals that still had some common sense to come forward and be like, why did you vote no, right? Or like, what the hell? And so it's remembering who this is meant to awaken. So it may look like one step back at times, but it's really propelling us 10 steps forward. Part 2.4, which is offense material misrepresentation. So that in itself can look very like, oh my God, somebody's misrepresenting fact, or material is going to be taken off the internet. That's not what it means, right? So I want us to be careful, right? So when you go to this section, it says, it is prohibited for any person to knowingly make a material misrepresentation of fact to a person designated under paragraph 34.7a. So it's only relating to that specific paragraph, and that specific paragraph is you cannot misrepresent a material fact to a person on the panel. That's just true. That's like if you're in court, if you're under oath, you're gonna tell the truth, right? This isn't like, oh, you put a tweet out there and you're misrepresenting something, therefore you're gonna be banned. Okay, so that's not what that says. It's about reading it and reading it in full and making sure you can make your own, your judgments for yourself. And so I think those are like the main things I wanted to cover. But, it's having just a level of calmness about what's going on, taking a step back, making your own judgments about things, and knowing that a lot of the stuff that they're saying is going to happen, we are already under. Again, being mindful in how it's continuing to transpire, being calm, remaining grounded, asking for accountability when we need to, and keeping an eye on it, right? Preparing for the best. Speaking from a place of resilience. We don't need to be in that continued martyrhood. We're going to continue to be suppressed mentality. Of course, it's easier for us to do that because we like to live in preservation mode, right? But then that's what gets our anxiety amped up and the fears. And so if you don't see things changing on your end, if you're not worried about it, remember that you don't need to be worried about it. Okay, remember that every single social platform, majority, let's say, well, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, already suppresses people's voices, TikTok too, based on the algorithm. So this is like having a regulated algorithm, right? And so just maintain the hope and focus in your platform, the stuff you create, live in that light energy, live in your purpose, right? So I'm sending you all so much love. Like I said, if you want to ever book a life purpose or general reading with me, you can via the link in my bio and hit subscribe if this resonated for you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right.